Welcome, adventurers. Today on Rebel Den King, I am for the first time ever not talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Instead, I am talking about the game that probably got me hooked on Pathfinder and other fantasy role-playing games, Battle Masters. Now, this is a 1992 board game that I frankly used to play at sleepovers all the time. As a 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old, playing this game, which you can see is on this huge battle mat here, with a group of friends was just about the best thing ever. So good that I decided to buy the game on eBay a couple years ago because it is no longer made. And I've actually played it at my birthday as an adult for the last few years, and it has been a great time. I have my assistant with me today, who hopefully does not knock over one of the cameras, and if so, I guess I will just have to adjust as we go along. So I want to talk about why I like this game so much, kind of give a critique and analysis of it, talk about some of the strategies you can use in the game, and how that might apply to other systems. So let's get going with just a bit about the game and its background. It is... You might not be able to see there, but it is from the makers of HeroQuest, and it is actually kind of a Warhammer game. It is kind of meant to be an intro to Warhammer itself. You are actually playing as the forces of Chaos versus the Imperial forces, and they're divided. I'm going to get all these out eventually, but I've got all of my units here. I'll show some of the units to the closer camera. The forces of Chaos are always going to be on these brown base plates, and they're going to be either this darker gray or this green base color, whereas the Imperials are going to be on these tan base plates, and they're going to be this red or this lighter gray color. So that's kind of how you easily tell the difference between the two armies. Now, when this game came out, it was sort of deemed too simple and too random, and there's some merit to that, but it's not without any strategy or any know-how to it. I read on Wikipedia from Battle Masters designer Stephen Baker. He reflected on criticisms that the game lacked strategic strength, and he said, "There is more strategy to it than you realize. I once had a US designer tell me it was too luck-driven. We played 14 games in a row, swapping sides after each game. I won all 14. You have to deploy and play to the strengths of your army, and you have to watch what cards have been played." So I want to talk about the two different armies as we go along, because they are quite different, actually. But do keep in mind, this is a game of dice. I've got my dice here. And it is a game of cards, which it treats cards very differently than most games. So yeah, there is going to be luck involved. But that being said, I, at least for the last few years, have tended to win more than I lose, though I've also certainly lost, and I've lost badly at times. So I guess take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt, and I realized I have one misplaced card, which I will move over there. Okay, let's get going with the basics of the two armies and the way that the all of the units basically work. So I'm going to start getting these out and get the boxes out of the way. So each one of these placards is a unit. Here I have, let's see if I can just get all of the Chaos out first. Now, when these, I think when you first get the box, this was new, so I don't know for sure, but when you first get it, all of these actual figures are like model pieces. It's like putting together models. So you actually have to cut them out of their original base plates. And then you do have to kind of slide them in. You can maybe see there are kind of grooves on the actual base plates, and you have to snap the figures in. They don't stay super well, which is why last night I actually went, I was playing Pathfinder, an online session with friends, and I spent the whole time just I decided to go for it. I super glued all of these in place. And honestly, it's been so much better. You can just lift one up and move it around. They do also have flags. There's a flag for each unit. They don't really do all that much, and I'm not going to use them right now just because at times with the flags, when you're doing a lot, like I'm going to be doing here, you kind of accidentally hit one and you move it around. But they actually kind of can be nice in a crowded environment because you can pick something up by the flag and then move it. But I'm not going to go through the trouble of putting those all on. So let's take a look at the Chaos Army and go over how each of the units can work here. So I will start here. Let's go with these. These are the Beastmen. So you can see the figures there, and you can see you've got the name of the unit. There's an insignia, which matters for a specific type of campaign that you can do later, but doesn't come up in your general play. And then this number here is the most important number. This is the number of dice, attack dice and defense dice that this unit rolls. It is not hit points, and that confuses a lot of people, including myself, when I pick the game back up. Has nothing to do with hit points. All of the units, except for one, have 3 hit points. The main difference is the attack dice. Now, the attack dice range from 2 to 5. So here's an example of goblins. They have 2. That is the weakest type of unit you can have. Now, the Chaos, I think both armies actually only have 1 unit that has 5 hit points. So this is the Chaos Champions. They have 5 here. They're the big mounted cavalry. Now, the Chaos Army has more units overall. You've got the Chaos Champions. There are usually doubles, so there are 2 goblins. Here are my other goblins. They have 2 points each. There are 2 orcs, 3 attack dice. Where are the other orcs? There are the other orcs. See if I can get these maybe lined up so that I can actually find them again. Beastmen, also 3 dice. Chaos Archers, 2. We've got our, what are these called? Chaos Warriors. Now, they have 4, so they're pretty beefy. And then we have Wolf Riders, and they're mostly just wolves because the riders don't really stay, and I'm not going to super glue them because then they won't actually fit in the box, so oh well. Those have 2 attack dice, and then last but not least, who does need to be snapped in because he's too tall, is the Ogre Champion with 4 dice. Now, this is the one unit I alluded to that actually has 6 hit points, which will come up later. So there are more units, but they tend to be on the lighter side. Whereas in the Imperials, we have slightly fewer units, but let's start here with the Imperial Archers. You will notice, they look the same, and you think they'd be the same, but the Chaos Archers had 2 attack dice. The Imperials have 3. The Imperials also have crossbowmen, just a single unit with 3 attack dice. They have 3 units of these men at arms. I think they have 3. Where is it? Yeah, there's the 3rd. Who also have 3 hit points. And I gotta say again, I'm very happy with my decision to super glue these. It's making this much easier. You would not have been able to lift it up like that otherwise. I think it was probably better when it was new, but I bought it used, so it's like very old plastic by now. Now we get into it. We have a lot more cavalry units. We have 3 units of our, what are they called? Imperial Knights that have 4 hit points each. There's the last one. We have 1 unit called the Lord Knights with 5, and I think I said hit points earlier, and you know what I mean, attack and defense dice. 5 dice. They're kind of the counterparts of the Chaos Champions. And then last, the specialty unit, the Mighty Cannon. So each side has a specialty unit, the Ogre Champion and the Mighty Cannon. Let's go over how gameplay actually works in a very simple example. I'm not going to set up the entire board, though I am going to clear this for now. Okay, so when you start a game, the default way to start is one player or one team will set up all this terrain. We're going to talk about terrain in a second. Then the other player chooses a side, any side. So based on the terrain, you might say, I want to be here, I want to be there. And then the teams take alternating turns laying out their all of their units at the very, very edges of the battle map. So we're not going to do that now because that takes a while for the cards to meet in the middle. But you get everything set, and then when you're ready, you actually draw a card to see whose turn it is. So here is an example of a card. That is for the Chaos Army, and that is the Wolf Riders. And this is actually a specialty card. This is a 2x movement card. So what that would mean is that each one of your Wolf Riders we'll say that they're going to ride forward to meet these men-at-arms, okay? Let's get these guys out of the way because they're tall. You'd have... I'm going to move these even further back so we can make use of the 2x. So once you draw that Wolf Riders 2x card, these Wolf Riders are going to move up to 2 spaces. Now, they don't have to. They can move a single space. They cannot move at all. But generally, you're going to want to move. I'm going to shuffle these better because I was practicing card counting or preparing for card counting earlier, which you're going to want to stick around for that. And these are poorly shuffled. Anyway, so what that would mean is, this first unit is going to move 1, 2 spaces and then declare that they want to attack. In each turn, you get to move, then attack, and that's it. You cannot actually attack, then move. You're discouraged from retreating, basically. You got to press on, which is interesting, and sometimes I wish you could, it definitely would change the tactics if that wasn't the case. But let's see how this actually works. I'll try to get this in view within my little dice tray here. So first, the attackers roll. And we're not rolling standard dice. This actually has its own dice, which I will show you here. They have 3 sides are skulls. 1 side is a shield, and 2 sides are blank. And what you want to do is first have the attack roll and see how many skulls you get. And that time, I got no skulls. Okay, redo, I got 1 skull. So that is 1 hit. And what you want to do then, as the defenders, is try to get as many or more shields. In this case, I did roll 1 blank, or 2 blanks, and 1 shield. There was 1 skull, there was 1 hit, there's 1 shield, there's 1 defense. No wound is taken. Let's try these guys. They move 1, 2, and they attack with 2 dice. There we go, 2 skulls. Now let's see if we can defend those 2 skulls. And it's a little... I have 1 shield in there. 2 skulls, 1 shield. That is 1 wound to that unit. Wounds are these little cardboard skull tokens. And what you do then is you simply place a wound on the unit. Second wound, it's still okay. Once you reach 3 wounds, you are removed from the battlefield. And that's it. You just keep going back and forth, drawing cards. Once you get to the end of the game, by the way, is just total annihilation. Though there are a few specialty scenarios that they call out in the rule book here, where annihilation isn't the goal. It's capturing an objective on the field. But you just keep going until the game is met, and if you reach the end of the card deck, you simply reshuffle them. Another interesting thing that will happen with the cards is, well, you will get to a point where a lot of units have been removed from the battlefield, and you might draw something like this. And this has the Chaos Champions and the Wolf Riders. If you don't have the Chaos Champions and Wolf Riders left, you simply discard that card. It just speeds up the game at that point. You do draw the next one, and you just speed up the game by saying, we call them dead cards in my games, just to not have to say, oh, who is it? Oh, wait, we don't have any of those units. Who is it? Oh, check the battlefield. Oh, we don't. You just get rid of them once they come up. Okay, so that's how the game is played with a few examples. I'm going to take a sip of tea here. And we are going to go over some of the specialty units and cards. So by default, a unit is going to be able to move one space and attack with the dice outlined on their unit stand here. That's the default. Most of the units in the game act that way. But there are some different ones. This might be obvious, but the archers, both the Imperial archers and the Chaos archers and the crossbowmen are ranged units. In this case, see if that's a little better. The Wolf Riders are crossing the river here. The archers are here, and they have one space in between. So there's one tile. The Wolf Riders are not in attack range of the archers here, but the archers can attack up to one space away. So they can attack someone if they were here, or here, or here, or here, or here, or here, or where I'm sitting. The kind of catch with them is they can't move and attack in the same round. So you kind of have to get your archers in position. Like this honestly would be a great position because you're going to hit people as they are approaching the river, which we'll talk about in a little bit, the terrain. So that's how archers work. Crossbowmen are nearly identical, except their range is actually one extra. So they can hit all the way from here, which is quite a lot of movement to close that gap, especially with the terrain affecting. So very good at defending positions or providing fire support for your attacks. The other thing we already saw, let's see if I can find, well, there it is again, the Wolf Rider 2X. Not all of the Wolf Rider cards are 2X, but that means they get to move 2 times in a single round. And again, you do have to move and then attack. So I don't think you can move, attack, and then move back. Though honestly, I think that would be really cool because that's sort of the flavor of that that unit is like the fast attack light unit. And I might house rule that they can, and only that unit can, and only with the 2X card, you can move, attack, and then move back. I think that would be pretty fun. And the Chaos Army tends to lose, I'll be honest, so they kind of need some help. A couple of other things to call out here in the cards. I'm just going to find one. Oh, there it is on the bottom. If you can see this, there is that little upward arrow with the dice on it. That is a charge card. This is for the Lord Knights, so the big cavalry unit on the Imperial side. That allows them to move as normal, but then attack with 1 extra dice. There are only a small handful of charge cards in the entire deck, and they're only ever available to the Chaos Champions. That's the only Chaos unit, and then the mounted units on the Imperial side. Interestingly, on the Imperial side, I believe there is a charge card just for the regular Knights here, these 3, as well as one just for the Lord Knights that we saw, as well as one that is all of the cavalry together, so all 4 of these units. That's a pretty devastating card. We'll talk about the strengths and weaknesses of different units and some of the strongest units in the game, but I think that might be the strongest card in the game. Now let's talk about the specialty units. Each side has their own specialty unit. You have the Ogre Champion for Chaos, and this might be the most fun that you can have with any of the units in the game. When the Ogre Champion card comes up and it is his time to move, this is what you do. You grab this deck of 6 Ogre cards. You shuffle them every time, and you draw 1. So I drew, there are only 2 types of cards. There's attack and move. I drew an attack. So let's go with another imaginary scenario here. I'll kind of play it out in this corner. Let's say that the Ogre Champion is here, and he is going to close distance. We're going to keep picking on these men at arms. So that first card is an attack. That doesn't really help. Oh well. Boom. Second card is a move. That is great. He's going to move. He's going to attack. He gets to roll his 4 dice against their 3. If they're still alive, he draws another move. He can choose to move if you want, or he keeps drawing, and he can attack again. He gets to do the whole attack again, another 4. And then, look at that, a move. That means that the Ogre Champion, depending on the way that the cards come up, is the only unit that can attack and then move away and retreat at the end, which I do recommend doing if it comes up. It also means that at the beginning of the game, you know, let's say the Ogre Champion is coming from this side of the board and the nearest enemy is all the way over here. Usually what I do then is you just don't even bother with the cards because you know there are 3 attacks and 3 moves, and you just say 1, 2, 3, and he moves 3. Because you know he's going to not use those attacks. He's just going to move forward. It also means that if you don't want to move for some reason, maybe you're completely surrounded and you just want to attack 3 times, it's a little hard to imagine because you'd still probably in that case want to destroy a unit and then move out. But if you're like, I'm just not going to move, you can, again, just attack 3 times if you've got all 6 cards. And notice I did say, if you have all 6 cards. Because the way the Ogre works is this is the only unit with 6 hit points. There he fell, demonstrating that this plastic is old. When you take a wound as the Ogre Champion, you take a hit point. You also discard 1 Ogre card. So when the game goes on, you could have a severely wounded Ogre Champion who just, for example, just can lumber around, just can move. That's it. It's a very fun, thematic way to play where this thing is a beast that is hard to take down, but it's slowing down and getting less effective as you go on. So what's a good way to deal with the Ogre? What's with the Imperial specialties? The Mighty Cannon. Now, the Mighty Cannon is quite hit or miss. It's got a lot going for it and a lot going against it. And I generally think it's actually not that strong of a unit. I'm looking for its cards as I talk here. I will just keep looking as I keep talking. They might be in the box. They are in the box. Yeah, I spent like an entire game where I think in the first time through the deck, it did nothing. It was just terrible. It missed it. And I was like, man, the cannon really isn't good. And then it won me the game. I mean, it just obliterated the Chaos Army the second time through the deck. So it can be quite good. When the cannon card comes up, this is what you do. There are these cannon tiles, and there is I should make this more fun. There is a specialty tile that is a target marker. You see that? The target marker? You simply like place that on the target. So I'm going to try to hit the orc there. And I'm going to make this realistic with a full battlefield in front of me. You know, here's an ideal setup. I've got my archers, and then I've got my men-at-arms blocking the way, while the wolf riders are crossing the battle path. Now, what you do is, the way I play it is mechanically the same as what's in the rule book, but I like to, you don't look, you shuffle these up, you don't look, and you need to pick a path, and it technically needs to be the shortest path possible. In this case, you know, I could go either way, so I'm just going to kind of go 1, 2, and you lay out a marker on every space. And then you flip. I got a bounce. There are 3 types of items there. A bounce means that the cannonball bounced, and any unit in that square automatically takes a wound. And now you see why the cannon can be problematic. I just automatically gave my own unit a wound. I got another bounce. I just wounded my own unit again. Now I got an explosion. You see that? An explosion. Well, fortunate, that was on an enemy square Anytime an explosion is turned up, boom, instantly dead. They're gone. This is the other type of tile. It is a fly. A fly is nothing happens. So if you get bounces and flies, this will continue. And if I'm able to turn this over and the next card is here, that means I have reached my target and that target is instantly destroyed. Now, you just saw there why this can be a good and a bad unit. I injured 2 of my own units, though I did completely take one out, completely take out an enemy unit. So if you're in a situation that looks more like this, where you've got a cannon here, and it is just surrounded, there are just units everywhere. A really fun thing to do is say, well, I'm going to go for this unit way out here, because then you turn over, I got to find the marker again. You're going to turn over so many cards that and they're all going to be over your enemy's tiles, that it's not a big deal. Okay, there's a fly, so no damage done. There's a bounce, they take a wound. There's a fly, okay, and then boom, that unit is destroyed. So you can see how you could potentially wound multiple units along the way to blowing one up. The other cool thing about the cannon is in the situation that an enemy is right next to you there, you can simply say, that's it. You don't have to draw any others. It's an instant kill. But that's not the end of the story. Whenever there's an explosion next to the cannon, so whether that's the first tile you flip in a long shot or here, you then need to see if the cannon misfires. You need to shuffle the tiles and draw. I got lucky. That is the one card you want to see. That is no damage to the cannon. On a bounce, the cannon takes a wound. On an explosion, the cannon is also removed from the battlefield. This does mean that there are times, there have been games where you decide that you want to take out this unit here, okay? Just 2 spaces away. Very first time you use the cannon. Here it goes. Explosion. And you're like, oh, please don't be a misfire. And then, of course, looking for it here. You're like, please, please, please don't. Explosion. Cannon removed. You blew yourself up. You did no damage to the enemy. It happens. It's brutal. But it's kind of what makes it fun. Okay. So we talked in depth about the units here. Now let's talk about terrain, there's a lot of it in this great big map. So I'll open it up a bit here, and you can see the default map. The features to note are mainly the river. The river is not passable except at the 3 ford locations here. You can cross the river here. So you can go 1, 2, 3, you can go through there, but you cannot cross here. The other terrain to note is the roads, which don't do anything on their own, but they do prevent you from placing other terrain. So what is the other terrain? Well, first of all, let's talk about these 4 pieces here. These are all hex-sized tiles that you can place. This is a marsh, and it creates a completely unusable space. So you can't place a marsh on the road, if I remember right, though. If someone knows, I'm not going to bother to look it up now. That might not be correct. So if I place this marsh tile here, this is a completely unusable square. The other side of this tile is another ford. So you can create another river crossing if you would like. There are also, the backs of these are more marshes and fords, but there are also ditches. What's interesting is you actually have ditches with different numbering sides of protection. So what a ditch does is, first of all, the sides with the spiked log barrier are not crossable. So if this was here I've got the spikes facing this way. Maybe I'll put it closer to this camera. Spikes facing this way. You cannot move across the spikes. You have to move from a side without spikes. The other thing is that any unit attacking across the spikes rolls one fewer dice. Let me just double check that. I took notes here. Or I guess it's called the ditch. Yeah, so... Oh yeah, it's actually the attackers roll one fewer dice and the defenders roll one more. So yeah, it is a defensive dream. The exception to that, though, is the archers and crossbow. If you have the archers and crossbow in this space, they do not have that penalty for attacking across. I want to double check if that's true just for them or if it's also true for the cannon, because it feels like the cannon should be able to use that. Let's see if I can find it. Yep, exception, archers and crossbowmen attack across the fortified side of a ditch at regular combat value. Oh yeah, the cannon doesn't have attack dice, so of course it's fine. That's what I was remembering. It's like you want to put the cannon in a ditch. Okay. The other two things to talk about with the terrain are these little plastic hedge pieces. All these do is create one impassable barrier. So you can't move across a hedge, but they don't do anything for attack or defense. And then there is the mighty tower. It occupies an entire space. It begins unoccupied, I think at the start of every scenario, though there might be some where it is occupied. And you can move just through a regular movement into the tower. Now, this can only be occupied by basically all of your foot soldiers. So your mounted units, the ogre and the cannon cannot go in here, but foot soldiers and archers certainly can. Let's put some archers in there. What happens with the tower? Well, it is awesome. The occupants roll an extra dice on both attacks and defense. And anybody attacking it rolls one fewer attack dice. So if you have these 2 dice wolf riders here attacking the tower, they only roll one die to attack. These 3 dice archers on top would defend with 4, and then they would counterattack also with 4. So it has huge strategic importance. So let's talk about strategy. Okay, some basics of the game, and then some meta of the game as we go along. And I'm going to try to speed things up here. I'm already getting some low battery warnings on my devices. The very first thing, and this is like so true of Pathfinder, this is why I think that this relates to Pathfinder so much, is sort of the combat strategy, is to focus fire. I mean, this should be obvious, but when my knights come up, when it's their card, and there are these beastmen standing in their way. Oops, I lost a rider there. They're also not super glued because they're also too tall. Let's say we've got a couple of these warriors and these beastmen are blocking our pass. Let me open it up to a spot that's 3. I'm playing in a corner. That was a bad idea. Anyway, let's say we've got this as our initial starting position. You see how these tall pieces can be a little annoying sometimes. Let's say this is the initial starting position. You don't want to move and attack, then move and attack, then move and attack necessarily, because you're attacking 2 different units. Now, this isn't a corner, so it's a little bit bad of an example. But the point is, you want to eliminate a unit as quickly as possible. Let me do a slightly better. Let's just pretend we can go in the river for now, okay? We start like this. Don't have this unit attack here. Have them attack here first. Then this unit attacks here. Then this unit attacks here. This unit might not need to do that attack. They might be dead already, but you want to remove things from the battlefield because remember, A wounded, just like in Pathfinder, a wounded unit still attacks and defends with its full dice. So they're still potent. They can still counterattack. You want to get rid of them completely. The next thing, and this is kind of a little meta for this game, because remember, you can't attack, then move, and that is to keep your options available. I'm going to modify here. There's one unit that is totally out of range of everybody. Now, what happens when I have my knights go? You might say, attack, attack, attack. Wrong. You don't want to attack with blue first, because you want to attack with yellow first. On the beastmen. They might still be alive. Oh well. Actually, I take that back. I'm still wrong. Attack with red first on the beastmen here. If you take them out, great. Then this unit, yellow, can attack here, and this unit can move and attack here. Replaying that same scenario, if red attacks and doesn't take out these beastmen, then yellow attacks, and maybe then they do take out the beastmen, leaving blue free to go here. And then finally, it could be red attacks, they're still standing, yellow attacks, they're still standing, blue attacks, okay, finally they're done. But you see how blue and yellow have movement and other attack options, and red only has one? Start there. It's so tempting to just focus on what's physically closest to you and say, I want to get them. That's a big mistake, and I've seen people do that, and that is where the strategy does come into the game, where you can end up, losing because you are not making full use of your turns. Speaking of not making full use of your turns, when you are starting, I believe strongly in grouping units of similar types, because they will get movement cards at the same time. Let me show you what you don't want to do. You don't want to put your knights on the back line like that, and then your men-at-arms in front of them here, and maybe, someone else here. And we got to get across the battlefield this way. What happens when the knight card comes up? They can't move. They can't move through the square. They can't occupy the square. Sure, maybe the men-at-arms get a card, and then all that your knights can do is follow them. So instead what you want to do is you kind of got to put yourself in column formations, which is hard when you're on the short side of the river here, for sure. But if you put yourself in columns like this, now when the knight card comes up, they all shift forward by one. The men-at-arms, they all shift forward by one. So keep that in mind. Let's see. The other thing I really like to do when you are beginning to meet in the middle, I really believe strongly in controlling the center as much as you can. So let's say we've crossed here. I want to see my knights kind of in the center, and here you can begin to spread out, because you don't necessarily know where the bulk of the battle is going to take place. And there's limited movement, remember. So if you're all the way on one flank and the battle actually ends up taking place over here for some reason, you're going to waste all of your cards just moving. Whereas if you've got your strong units, especially in the middle, then you can kind of just take 2 or 3 to get them to where they need to go, and then they can get in a lot of attacks. So stronger units in the middle, weaker units on the flank. That way the weaker units can move in to shore up the flank, but I really like having the strong in the middle so they can be deployed. They can be deployed wherever is best for them. Another formation tip, I really like having my strong units like that, followed by my ranged support. This, if you've got something that looks like this, I'm getting to the middle here, but if you've got your knights with archers behind them, and there's one unit here, let's say, if you can see they have knights on 3 sides and archers on 2, or archers in range from 2. The archers are safe. They're not going to get attacked there. And then if you get a card that comes up that's going to affect all of your units, remember again, attack with the archers first. Try to take them out, and then the knights are free to move to the next target. On the next turn, the archers can advance or the knights can fall back as needed. And then finally, terrain. The river, oh my gosh, that can change the game. When there are only 3 crossings, you want to basically be strong unit, like right here, so that you can only be attacked from 1 square at a time. And then you want, look at what you can do with the ranged units here. These 2 archers can both hit the 1 like bridge or ford crossing spot, plus a lot of the opposing riverbank. So you can basically hit the enemy troops while they're staging and then focus fire on the ones that are trying to cross. It's very tough to break out of this narrower section, which is why the river is offset. Generally, you'll be able to cross before you're bottlenecked, but if you are this side controlling the bigger space and you get a lot of cards, try to set up a good defensive bottleneck there, because it's going to go a long way for you. The tower, again, is fantastic. Generally, the game is a race to the tower at the beginning. You want to get in the tower. And I recommend putting your archers or your crossbow up there if you can. The crossbow especially is good, though it's kind of bad, and we'll talk about that later. Otherwise, strongest unit you can, though it doesn't have to be one of your strong units, which is kind of nice. It's a little more applicable to the Chaos because they have so many weak units. But if you put a unit with 3 in there rather than your unit with 4 attack dice, well, now they're a unit of 4. You've just given yourself another unit of 4, which is quite potent. Ditches, I think, remember these pieces, the spiked kind of pit pieces, they're a little tough. Obviously, losing dice on the attack isn't great, but gaining defense is nice. And this is where, obviously you really want to put your archers and crossbow. That is the best spot for them, though it's also a great idea to have one unit kind of occupying the center if you can, though I'll admit a lot of times what ends up happening is due to the attack and defense penalties, a unit will just kind of stay there, like in their own little pillbox basically, and then the rest of the battle just sort of ignores them, which is, unfortunate. And then the hedges are just annoying. They actually are kind of poorly designed. They're so small that they're hard to see. They don't stay in place very well. A lot of times I don't even notice that we've knocked them over. So to be honest, we don't even really play with them. I might try to build a bigger hedge that is sturdier and more visible so that we actually use it in the future, because it can be great. Now onto some of the more even meta strategy of the game, starting with the dice. Remember that on the dice, there are more skulls. There are 3 skulls on a d6 and only 1 shield. That means you are 3 times as likely to get a skull than a shield, which means attacking is always worth it. You can roll 2 dice against a 5 dice unit and deal some serious wounds. I've done it. I've taken out 5 dice Chaos Champions with 5 dice Lord Knights with my 2 dice Goblins before. The chances of rolling 2 skulls on 2 dice is 25%. That is not bad. The chances of 2 shields on 4 dice, you'd think would be good. No, it's only 11%. So you actually have a very good chance of dealing damage with these smaller units, which is why as Chaos, you want to go on the attack. You have more players, you have more cards in the deck, which we'll talk about, and you aren't going to be very good at defense. So try to get in those attacks early, because that is where the dice do favor you quite a lot. And then, yeah, as I said, those smaller units stand almost no chance in defense. They really don't. I mean, when you were going up against a 5, let's see a sample roll here. So that is 3 skulls on 5 dice. Let's see what a 2 gets me. 1 shield. Okay, not bad, but that's still 2 wounds already just from 1 attack. And there might be more coming that round. So only a 3-to-1 ratio of dice would actually be equal odds of receiving or not receiving a wound. And that actually never happens without some of the modifiers. So It's pretty brutal. It doesn't even ever happen because you can't put the stronger units in here. So yeah, it doesn't ever happen. The dice always are going to favor the attackers in this game. So yeah, again, if you're the Chaos Army, attack. It's about all you've got. I think it's how they want you to play. You're chaos. You're bad. You're just rampaging. That's how the like suggested battle scenarios at the end of this. There's a little campaign. That's how they play out. So lean into it. If you are the Imperial Army, though, you still want to go on the attack for sure, because even playing defense is not going to favor you. But because you do have ranged units, you can be a bit more defensive, and you can definitely lean into the terrain and everything a bit more as the Imperial Army. Now let's talk about the cards and the sort of meta of card counting almost, and the way that the various ways that the cards can play into or against your strategy. The Chaos Army does have more cards overall because they have more units, they have more cards. That means they're going to be able to move quicker generally, so they will be able to maybe bypass some potential defensive areas or overtake them, get to the tower first. The Imperial Army, though, has way better cards. The Imperial Knights, these three, the red, yellow, blue horses. Remember, they each have 4 dice, and there are 3 of them. They also have, I think, the most amount of total cards of any units in the game, which means those guys are moving every 2 to 3 turns, and they're going 4 dice at a time, 1, 2, 3, just absolute wrecking crew. By my count, they were about 1/3 of the total firepower of the entire Imperial Army, which is, very impressive. The Imperial Army also has slightly more charge cards, so they get those extra big attacks. And then remember, they do have more ranged units, and their ranged units are stronger, that 3 versus 2 attack dice. And then the crossbow, so that they have 3 total infantry units of range plus the cannon, which means even if the Chaos Army seems to be at a safe distance, the Imperials can often still quite do a lot of damage. Surprisingly good cards. Talked about them earlier, but the Wolf Riders, they're weak, but they have a lot of cards. And with those 2 X cards, you can actually sometimes get across the battlefield, pick something off, and then the next card is yours again, and you can retreat. So they're actually quite good. And then quite bad are actually, surprisingly, the crossbows, because I think they only have 5 total cards in this entire deck. And remember, they can't move and shoot in the one turn. So they sometimes literally don't attack an entire cycle through the deck, because they just have to move into position, and that's it. The more cards come up for the archers, so they typically at least get 1 or 2 attacks. But sometimes I've actually thought before, I'm going to use the crossbows are going to kind of be the linchpin of my strategic defense here. It was a terrible idea. I totally logjammed myself. I blocked myself from moving the rest of my army. It was a total massacre because I didn't know the meta of the cards. I didn't know that these guys just actually do less than every other unit. On that note, card counting. You want to pay attention to the cards that come up and kind of know, like I said, overall, the Knights have a lot of cards. The Wolf Riders have a lot. The Crossbowmen barely have any. The Beastmen surprisingly don't have a lot. The Men-at-Arms and the Chaos Warriors and Goblins and stuff are about average. One thing to keep in mind is at the beginning of the game, if you are moving a bunch, you're getting, it's your turn, your turn, your turn, your turn. Oh, the enemies go, oh, and it's yours again 2 more times. That means that in the back half, you're not going to get a lot of cards, which means you might just ride out, use all your cards riding out, and then the enemy has to take 1 movement to get to you. Oh, and then their card comes up in the attack, and attack, and attack, and attack, and attack. So you use all your cards to move, and then they use all their cards to attack. That is not going to work out well for you. So if you are moving a lot initially, get to a defensive position and wait. Get to the tower, get to ditches, block the river if you can, try to survive until the deck cycles, and then it'll be an even fight. And you probably will be in a better position to win then. But If you are not moving a bunch early on, don't sweat it, because you want to kind of look for those columns of enemies that are sort of putting themselves a little too far out. And you might have, like, your knights are only 1 or 2 squares away, or tiles away, to a couple of weaker units, and they haven't moved a lot, but they have a lot of cards, which means they are probably going to get some 2 to 3 to maybe even 4 turns in a row when they will just be able to meet the enemy who's already close, devastate them, and then retreat to a defensive position. So, a couple more things about the cards, and then we'll get onto some closing thoughts. The Imperials do have 26 total cards. They have 88 total movements. Remember, the different cards have different units that can move. So sometimes here's an example where I'm going to move and fight with my archers, my crossbow, and my footmen. But then you might have others let's look for another Imperial one. It's literally the same cards. Here, like just the Mighty Cannon, for example. There are a few all-army cards, and there are a few other specialties in there. So 88 total movements, and I counted, I think, 323 total attack dice between the cards. So that is the cards, which units come up, how many of each unit there are, and how many attack dice they have. And then 58 total defense dice. That is just the sum of every unit's value there. So again, that was 26 total, 88 movements, and 323 attacks, and 58 defense. The Chaos, 33 total cards, 129 movements, 373 attack rolls, 45 defense dice. So way more movements, actually more attack dice overall, though you wouldn't think so because they have lower average number of dice per unit, but they have more cards. But then only 45 defense dice. So it does even itself out. To kind of wrap things up here, I love this game. It is simple. It really is. It's a lot of luck, but there's so much fun in the strategy, and it is so immersive. It is such a big board here. It literally doesn't fit on any table that I own. It might look like it does, but it's actually wider than our full dining room table. You kind of have to play it on the floor. You get this terrain, you get these pieces that you're moving around, and now they're not falling all over the place, which is great. Everyone I've shown this to in the last few years absolutely loves it. It's kind of just what we do at my birthday party now, which is why I'm talking about it now. It's a little bit after the holidays and after my birthday. There is a lot of strategy to it, like that good positioning initially to not box yourself in, to not waste your own cards. Understanding the benefits of attack versus defense, like I went over, using the varying terrain, using multi-step conditional thought process in your attacks, like I was showing earlier, like, oh, if this unit attacks and takes them out, well, then the other unit is free to move around. If this unit doesn't take them out, well, then my second unit can do a second attack, rather than the other way around of accidentally boxing yourself in and saying, oh, well, shoot, the enemy's dead, and now my other unit can't do anything. So there is quite a lot of strategy to it. I would say that still you could play a perfect game and lose, but that's only if you're both playing a pretty perfect game. But if someone is playing a poor game and they're making a few of those mistakes and you are playing well and not making those mistakes, you'll probably win no matter what the dice and the cards do. But on that note, there is a lot of luck. I mean, there are literally cards and dice in this one game. I have seen like 10 over 10 back-to-back turns for one army. That's pretty impossible to bounce back from, because remember, there is the advantage to the attackers in this game. So you just sit there rolling your piddly defense dice and, well, you lose. And there's not much you can do, and it wasn't your fault. It was just the cards. I've also, rolled 6 dice on a charge card and had 0 skulls. 0. I've had a unit with 2 defense dice keep rolling 2 shields over and over and just be like this heroic last stand kind of a thing. So that happens too. And then finally, I want to talk about some possible house rules and adjustments that I might do. One thing I've done is I've split the deck between like Chaos and Imperial, and let's just pretend I've split it here. And what I do is you have Imperials take a turn. Chaos take a turn. Imperials take a turn. Chaos takes a turn. Imperials take a turn. Chaos takes 2 turns to kind of even things out. That eliminates that complete luck factor, though, you still don't know which units you're going to move, so there is some luck there. But that's an idea. I also wonder about the archers and crossbow not being able to move and shoot. It kind of makes sense in a way. They are pretty powerful if they can move and shoot, but I almost wonder if maybe they should be able to, or if their range was increased by a little bit. They could do 2 squares rather than 1. And then really realistically, I feel like maybe the crossbows should have only a range of 1. And it should be the archers that have a range of 2. And maybe the archers all roll only 2, even including the Imperial archers, but the crossbowmen do roll 3. I think that's a little more accurate. Like, I think of a crossbow as being more powerful direct fire, a little more accurate, less range, whereas the archers, can lob volleys, which are going to be less accurate, kind of represented by fewer hit dice, but a further range. I think that would make sense, and I do want to try it out sometime. Anyway, I think that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this. I know this is very different if you have watched my channel for anything else. And if not, welcome to the channel. I should have done the whole, like, comment, subscribe earlier, but I'm too excited by this game. I just got going into it. Let me know if you want a breakdown of any more strategy or how I did the card counting. I think I got it right, but I swear every time I went through, I made a mistake, so I need to keep double checking. That's about it. I guess we'll see you next time. I have another board game from my childhood that I want to talk about, though admittedly, it's not quite as good as this one. This is just so hard to beat. This immersive environment is just, yeah, nothing beats it. Look, I love Foundry, VTT for doing Pathfinder, and I like other games, board games with cards and things, but this whole battle mat and moving pieces around, it's just fantastic. I also like that it's simple because it's easy to teach people at a party and just have fun. And it doesn't take, I love you, Pathfinder, but I'm looking at my bookshelf right now, thousands of pages. This is it. This is the rule book for this. So it's great. All right. I'll catch you next time, adventurers.